we just have put together a video of what not to do in a green-white checkered situation.
This is going to be the training video for what not to do on a green-white checker.
As we're in overdrive.
Did they get to the overtime line?
Overtime?
Overtime.
Headed into overtime.
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 Sponsored by Credit One Bank.
Hey everyone, I'm Ben Schneider. And one of my more popular commentaries on this channel is a video I did examining the NASCAR playoffs. And with more and more controversies surrounding late race restarts these days, and not just in NASCAR, I think it's a good time for me to examine another problem I have with modern day NASCAR, and that's overtime. Now let me be just as clear as I was in my playoffs criticism. I'm well aware that overtime is here to stay. Enough people like it that there would be an uproar if NASCAR got rid of it. And if you need proof of that, look no further than how a lot of NASCAR fans reacted when the 2020 Indy 500 ended under caution. So again, the purpose of this commentary is not necessarily to call upon NASCAR to dump overtime. Instead, it is simply to explain why, in my opinion, overtime in motorsports is ultimately an absurd concept. So with that, let's get into it. If you're not a NASCAR fan, you may be wondering how overtime can exist in a sport where there's no clock or no tied game scores that ever need to be broken.
Overtime comes to NASCAR. Green-white checkers. Will it make for a happy ending, or is this just a fairy tale?
In most sports, overtime is used as a necessary extension of a game between two tied opponents to determine a winner. In NASCAR, however, the main reason for overtime appears to be ensuring the race finishes under green flag conditions. Overtime was originally referred to as a green-white checkered period. The name comes from the colors of three flags shown on 3 consecutive laps. A restart with 2 laps to go is signaled by a green flag, followed by a white flag on the final lap, and a checkered flag at the end of the race. Despite Steve Phelps saying in 2020, "We'll keep it unique to our sport."
Did it work? Yes. I wouldn't say Game 7 moments. We'll keep it unique to our sport.
The name was later officially changed to overtime. Honestly, what's up with that? You change the chase to the playoffs, you change green-white checkers to overtime. What's next? Are stages going to become periods or quarters? Look, I'm not a fan of either of these rules here, but at least you had unique names. If you want to keep it unique to your sport, why are we changing the names to be just like every other sport? The ARCA series and Truck series had trialed their own versions of this rule by the early to mid-2000s. But NASCAR's top division, the Cup Series, had historically only run races to their scheduled distance. You might recall Mike Joy's call of a 1998 Daytona 500, when Dale Earnhardt finally won the Great American Race.
20 years of trying, 20 years of frustration. Dale Earnhardt will come to the caution flag to win the Daytona 500.
Yep, that's right. Earnhardt came back to the caution flag to win the 500, not the checkered flag. This is because back in the day, NASCAR allowed drivers to race back to the start-finish line after the caution was displayed, and the running order under yellow would be determined by how the drivers came across the line. However, there was no overtime period. So if this happened late in the race, it very well could have meant racing for the win. All Earnhardt needed to do was maintain pace under caution, and the win was his. Earnhardt's win was a popular one, but Michael Waltrip's in the 2002 Summer Daytona race was met with controversy. A caution came out with a few laps remaining, and while NASCAR would sometimes on occasion throw a red flag to try to get a green flag finish, they elected not to, allowing Waltrip to take the win as they just ran the remaining laps under yellow. The fan reaction to this wasn't great, as many believed they had been robbed of an exciting green flag finish to the race. Additionally, the racing back to the caution rule was also problematic. At a 2003 race in New Hampshire, Dale Jarrett was stalled on the front stretch as drivers were racing back to the line at full speed, which caused this rule to come under criticism and eventually go away. But the straw that broke the camel's back for most people was when Jeff Gordon was ahead of Dale Earnhardt Jr. at the spring 2004 Talladega race as the caution came out with just a few laps to go. NASCAR was beyond the point of being able to red flag the race, allowing Gordon to take the victory over Earnhardt. Needless to say, it was not a very popular win.
I'm not sure if they were Pepsi cans or beer cans, but there's a lot of aluminum out there on the track, that's for sure. So I did a burnout over all those cans.
So in July of 2004, the same year as the introduction of their own version of playoffs, NASCAR adopted their own version of overtime.
Today, the Nextel Cup Series races under a new and what I think is one of the most controversial midseason rule changes in the modern era. It's a rule change that might leave fans at Talladega and Pocono seeing red. If this race reaches the scheduled distance under caution, competitors will be given 2 green flag laps to try and decide a winner in a green flag, white flag, checkered flag format.
If I was a fan sitting in the stands and didn't have a chance to see a green flag finish, it'd probably rub me the wrong way too. So I think it's been a good call.
I love the NASCAR guys, but I think that they all held hands and jumped off the cliff together in this one. It was absolutely the wrong decision. I've been in those situations where I've been hurt real bad. I've landed in a helicopter. I've been in a hospital for 3 days with tubes coming out of me because of a green-white checker restart, basically. And there's nothing ever good that comes out of those things.
Yep, that's right. NASCAR changed the rules on ending the race in the middle of the season. Just imagine if the NBA decided in the middle of their season, yeah, if the game's tied at the end of the first overtime, we're going to have our own version of penalty kicks by sending the 5 starters to the free throw line and determine a winner that way. You can't just change the rules mid-season, let alone the rules on how a race winner is determined. Now, to be completely fair, this wasn't a brand new concept entirely, as the green-white checkered thing was already being used in NASCAR's Truck Series, where they were even allowing multiple attempts at overtime.
We did not get white flags, so we will have, maybe for the last time ever, a second green-white checker when this race restarts.
NASCAR is making a change in all 3 series. They will end the race green-white checkered, but it will only be one time. So in this instance, if this would have taken place next week, Shane Mia would be your winner because we would have gone white flag and caution at the same time, and checkered and caution would have flown if we would have implemented the green-white checkered that NASCAR is doing, which starts next week. And so this is a big change that's taking place in this series.
The upcoming rule change was referenced on the broadcast at Gateway, a race that saw 4 attempts to finish under green.
My gosh, this is incredible! They're beating
they hit the wall!
no!
Bobby Hamilton up almost on 2 wheels and into the wall. The caution's going to fly again. Chad Chaffin will move into the top spot.
But we haven't got the white flag yet. We will have another green-white checker. Look at David Starr.
Whoa!
Oh, we got another crash.
Here we go again!
Up on the side, that's the 14 of Rick Crawford sliding sideways down the backstretch.
Oh, Lord.
Unbelievable.
Andy Houston and Rick Crawford getting into it coming out of turn number 2, and now the safety crews will immediately get out and try to take care of the 14 of Rick Crawford.
Now what we're facing here is a decision. I mean, this is incredible. We cannot get the race finished.
We will try for the 4th time for a green-white checker. We've already crashed 6 trucks, Kenny, on 3 previous attempts.
As you can see, a lot of sheet metal would have been saved that night if we had just accepted that the race happened to be under caution when it reached its conclusion.
And we just have put together a video of what not to do in a green-white checkered situation. And so obviously this will be something that will be shown over and over to all 3 series of NASCAR to make sure that they realize you cannot push it too far.
This is going to be the training video for what not to do on a green-white checker.
NASCAR's tweaked the format several times over the years. They went back to allowing multiple attempts in 2010, giving each race up to 3 chances at ending under green.
Remember, this is the last time, more than likely, in the history of NASCAR that we will see multiple green-white checkers.
And in 2016, they moved the so-called overtime line to the backstretch. The attempt was previously only considered the final one if the leader completed a full lap and took the white flag. But now, they only had to reach a designated spot on the backstretch for that to be the case. That is, until the 2017 Brickyard 400, when a wreck developed off turn 2 before Casey Kane reached the overtime line. But NASCAR waited until he crossed the line to display the caution.
And the 11 goes around. They wreck behind him. Did they get to the overtime line? They haven't got there yet. Has the caution come out yet? Now the caution comes out. The question will be, did the caution come out after he crossed the overtime line? And we take a look at the overtime line. Casey Kane was there before the caution came out.
NASCAR then moved the overtime line back to the start-finish line at all tracks starting with Watkins Glen, changing the rules in the middle of the season again. But my criticism of the rule does still go beyond the fact that I'm opposed to mid-season change. I'm going to be honest with you. Like many fans, I was a bit disappointed when the 2020 Indianapolis 500 ended under caution. But ultimately, the race isn't called the Indianapolis 495, 505, or 525. It's the Indianapolis 500, and we accept the result because those were the conditions we faced at mile number 500. Motor racing is not a timed sport. The 500 in Daytona 500, the 500 in Indianapolis 500, the 200 in Verizon 200 at the Brickyard, whatever. These numbers are not arbitrary. The number is there to signify the number of miles, kilometers, laps, or whatever in the race. Because of overtime, however, the leader at 500 miles in the 2020 Yellowwood 500 isn't declared the winner of the event. The race is extended 12 laps in 32 miles, and the Yellowwood 500 now becomes the Yellowwood 532. You also have to consider the fact that when the race distances change, race strategies have to be altered. Drivers who thought they were good on fuel to the finish because they were planning on a scheduled distance now may have to go into ultra-conservation mode.
Just got some information, DW. Steve Letarte, crew chief for Dale Earnhardt Jr., said go.
Go.
Get
and he is, man. He has turned it up.
This is what cost Dale Jr. the win in the 2011 Coke 600. He was told he was good on fuel, and started pushing hard in closing laps. But the race went into overtime, and Kevin Harvick came through for the win, extending a 3-year winless streak for the most popular driver in NASCAR as he coasted across the line in 7th place. It didn't have to be that way. There was no tie to be broken, and no clock that had reached zero. But in the push for entertainment, Dale Jr.'s race was compromised, and over 100,000 hearts were broken in the grandstands.
And the fans' vote has been heard all over the United States, and you're getting exactly what you asked for.
Be careful what you wish for, NASCAR fans. Beyond what the race is called, the saying cautions breed cautions is especially true at the end of a race. Aggression is turned up to 11, as drivers can no longer wait to make their moves. More cautions lead to more torn up race cars, and thus larger repair bills for the teams. And the cycle often repeats itself 2 or 3 times before the drivers can even take the white flag, let alone the checkered. The 2004 truck race at Gateway is a perfect example of this, and it even led to on-air discussions of why the move to a single attempt might be a good thing.
Okay, and we can't debate it right now, but why? Well, that was why, because every time you go green, white, checkered, you have wrecks like that. Everybody's on the seat, they're chewing the steering wheel off, and they're like, okay, man, I got 2 laps, I'm going to get these spots. And what's going to happen? They're just going to keep wrecking and wrecking and wrecking. So that's what happens when you have green, white, checkered. So I'm putting up for NASCAR right now just because this was the perfect example.
Only 4 times before, though, Kenny, in the history of the series, out of 44, I think, green, white checkers, was there ever multiple checkers. So about 1 out of every 11 times, they had a multiple green, white checker. But again, this is going to be the last one.
I do, Kenny Wallace, I do believe in green, white, checkered, okay? Ray Dunlap, he's hearing me down there. I do believe in it, but I think NASCAR has done a great job saying we're only going to do it 1 time starting next week, okay? Because of what you see.
I also have to commend NASCAR in making sure that we don't have a fiasco like we saw in the truck race at St. Louis.
But beyond the issue of tearing up perfectly good race cars, there's also the issue of driver safety. The 2020 Daytona 500 took multiple overtime periods to complete. On what would ultimately be the final lap, Ryan Newman was inadvertently spun out, causing his car to flip over before being hit in the driver's side window while he was upside down. And while Newman would unbelievably make a full recovery and walk out of a hospital less than 48 hours later, there was a period of a couple hours that night where we genuinely didn't know if Newman was going to be okay. Now, to be completely fair, an accident like this could have happened on any lap at any point in the race, but it's exponentially more likely to happen towards the finish. And the longer the finish keeps getting extended, the greater those chances become. It was a scary night for NASCAR fans. But at least they got their green flag finish, I guess. There's also the TV window to consider. A lot of fans understandably get upset whenever NBC decides to bump the race from network television to their cable sports channel, NBCSN. Or I guess they'll be bumping it to USA going forward, but that's beside the point. While a noon or 1 p.m. start would allow for some extra time to ensure a race could end within the broadcast window, the reality is that a lot of Cup races are starting later in the afternoon these days. The more the race keeps getting extended, the more likely it is broadcast partners will run into logistical issues. When NASCAR doesn't build enough of a window for you to work with, you run into a situation that can leave many fans in the dark. There's nothing you can do about cautions in the middle of a race. Unless you remove the stage cautions, which I'd actually be in favor of, but that's a video for another time. But you can end a race under caution, rather than extending it. And the TV directors will be thankful, as will any fans without a premium cable package. So let's wrap it up here. What's the takeaway? Well, it should be okay to end a race under yellow. It may be a bit of a downer, but that's motorsports sometimes. When you try to guarantee a green flag finish, you're very likely to run into problems. It doesn't even have to be NASCAR. Just take a look at last December's Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in Formula 1. Michael Masi and race control were determined to prevent a thrilling season-long battle between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton and under the safety car. This led to a confusing series of events where only some lap cars were allowed through, and gave Verstappen a golden opportunity to overtake Hamilton with his fresher tires. Hamilton was essentially a sitting duck, and the one-lap shootout was all Verstappen needed to win the race and the World Championship. Now there's no refueling in Formula 1, and all the cars carry enough fuel calculated to run the scheduled distance. So you'll never see overtime in F1 without a major regulation change. But the point is that manufacturing a 1 or 2 lap shootout sometimes leads to even more controversy than you would have had the race just ended under caution. Combine that with all the changes NASCAR's made to the overtime rules over the years, the leader at the advertised distance not being guaranteed the win, and the added risks of tearing up even more equipment, I think it's safe to say overtime certainly has some flaws, and ultimately is a worse way to end a race than simply calling it at its scheduled conclusion. So tell me, is it really worth all of these things just to maybe get a green flag finish? Let me know why or why not in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching.